Have you noticed how quickly the punditry pendulum swings? One week, a manager is a genius for pushing his midfielders high and overloading the pitch. The next week, he's clueless because opponents exploited the very space that was created by putting and pushing his midfielders high. The same tactical idea goes from brilliant to naive based entirely on the result. Today, I want to rant. And I want to rant about how we shouldn't take football pundits seriously. And we should just take whatever they say with a pinch of salt because for most of the time, I think they are just stomach pundits. Well, you ask me what stomach pundits are. If anybody knows what stomach pundits are, put it in the comments. We'll look at how pundit narratives flip-flop depending on results, why the same tactical innovation gets praise when Guardiola does it, but criticism when Amorim tries it, and how the entire punditry industry is built to entertain first and explain second. By the end, I'll make the case for seeking out nuanced analysis instead of reactionary hot takes. So here's the big question. Why do pundits call the same tactic genius one week and reckless the next week? Jamie Carragher, Gary Neville, Jamie Redknapp, Thierry Henry, Micah Richards, Kate Abdo, all these guys end up analyzing and seeming to be the hottest pundits in the world of football. But take Pep Guardiola, for example. In March 2024, after City beat United 3-1, Jamie Carragher called Pep Guardiola's use of John Stones as a hybrid centre-back and midfield a revolutionary tactical masterstroke. John Stones stepping into midfield was hailed as something English football had never seen before. It was said to be bold, genius, and historic. Now rewind to the 2021 Champions League final. City lose 1-0 to Chelsea. Guardiola drops both holding midfielders, pushes Ilkay Gundogan deeper, and starts an out-of-form Raheem Sterling. What's the narrative then? Overthinking, choking. Pundits like John Alosi and Mark Schwarzer claimed the tensions, the tinkering cost City the game. That he tries to be too smart, that he tries to be a genius, meanwhile he's not. He's an overrated manager. The same coach, the same habit of innovation went from genius to failure because of the result. This is outcome bias in action. A decision is judged almost entirely by the outcome. Win and you're a genius, lose and you're reckless. The actual tactical idea is barely considered in punditry. Now bring in Ruben Amorim. At United, he plays a 3-4-2-1. That becomes a 3-2-5 in possession. Wing backs pushing high and flooding the attacking spaces. One centre back stepping into midfield, right? If they need to. It's a close cousin of Guardiola's shape. So, for instance, I think in the Arsenal game, the very first game this season, what Amorim was doing was Matthijs de Ligt was stepping into midfield and basically playing the hybrid centre-back midfielder role that John Stones played under Pep Guardiola. So they ended up with a 2-2-5 or a 2-3-5, right? I think a 2-3-5 instead. And that was his way of fixing the midfield overload issues. The wing backs were high, the centre-back stepping into midfield. And it was basically a close cousin of Guardiola's shape. But after a derby defeat, Sky Sports says United look wide open. Gary Neville highlights the two-man midfield look too exposed. Amorim's persistence is branded as stubbornness instead of bravery. And you see, the thing is that if United had nicked a 2-1 win in that match, the exact same pundits would be talking about how progressive Amorim is. They would be calling it bold. They would be calling and comparing him to Pep. Same tactic, different results, completely different narrative. This tells you that punditry really is performance. It's entertainment. It's narrative building after the fact. A tactic is only ever framed through the lens of the scoreboard. Rarely do you hear the idea made sense in theory, but was poorly executed, or the structure was right, but the personnel didn't fit. That level of nuance is missing because it doesn't go viral. Pundits aren't rewarded for measured analysis. They're rewarded for hot takes, for making bold claims that resonate with the fans. That's why Amorim's stubbornness becomes the headline instead of a serious tactical discussion. If you're tired of surface level hot takes, rate this podcast, like it, and tell a friend. Help us build a community that thinks beyond the cliches in the world of football discussions. So why does this happen then? Because what's the incentive of pundits to do this? Why do pundits swing so wildly from one week to the next? The answer is simple. The job isn't about truth, it's about engagement, especially in the world of social media. Jonathan Liu put it well in The Guardian. He says, pundits and commentators used to be impartial, almost academic in their analysis. Today, the line between pundit and fan has blurred. Jamie Carragher doesn't just analyze Liverpool, he performs Liverpool fandom on TV. Gary Neville doesn't just break down tactics, he performs being a Manchester United fan voice too. That's what the networks want. Partisan, banter, tribalist in the way in which they discuss. And I mean tribalist in terms of football tribalism and fandom and football culture. It makes for good TV. Clips go viral. Fans enjoy it on social media. Fans tune in to hear their guy defend their club or slam the club to go viral. The modern attention economy rewards heat, no light. And that's one of the things that got me angry about the way in which people were discussing United, I think after the City defeat. Because all the fans and all the so-called tactical pundits that I saw literally were just giving hot takes. Amorim is the worst manager we've ever seen in United history. After Chelsea's defeat, everybody says Enzo Maresca must be looking at certain things, that his playing of Reece James in midfield is out of place. Reece James is not a midfielder. Guess what? The same people said it was genius when he played Reece James against PSG when they won the Club World Cup just a few months ago. And so people don't care about the actual sense behind the decisions that football managers and footballers are making now. And that's why outcome bias runs the show these days. Pundits know fans as more interested in emotional reactions than nuanced explanation. So they exaggerate. They say Guardiola choked. They say Amorim has to abandon his system. They know those words would light up group chats and Twitter trends. When Kylian Mbappe left PSG, if the PSG hadn't won the Champions League, if PSG hadn't been successful, everybody would say Luis Enrique is a manager with two big egos and he let the best player in the world leave and now his team is struggling. Because the team is doing well, Luis Enrique is the genius manager and is the best manager in the world. And that's exactly what happens. The problem is fans absorb these takes as if they are truth. Fans do not analyze these as just performance art. They take them as truth and ride off them to shape the entire discourse around football. Suddenly, United's issue isn't recruitment or execution. It's Amorim won't play a three-man midfield. Suddenly, Guardiola isn't a genius or inventing new structures. He's guilty of overthinking. This is what happens when analysis becomes content. It's no longer about understanding the game, it's about producing narratives that sell. So here's the real takeaway. If you want to understand football, don't rely solely on pundit class. Seek out tactical breakdowns that explain how the systems actually function. Look for analysts who highlight both the strengths and weaknesses of a structure. Watch the game for yourself. Notice the off-ball movement, the spacing, the transition, the press triggers. That's where the truth lives, not the hot take 2 minutes after full time. And if pundits sound contradictory, that's because they are. The contradictions aren't mistakes, they are features. They are integral parts of the punditry game now. Flip-flopping keeps the debate alive, keeps fans angry, engagement arguing. It's fuel for their attention. There's a famous video where Gary Neville sat down and analyzed, I think on Sky Sports, why Pep Guardiola's tactic would never survive in the Premier League. That was the first season when Guardiola was coming. He said Guardiola's tiki-taka and flowery and technical football And flowery and technical football is not going to survive in the Premier League because Guardiola and the Premier League would not match. The Premier League is too physical for him. Guess what? 10 years down the line, Guardiola has won 6 Premier Leagues. And now they will discuss him and say he's the greatest manager in world football or one of the greatest managers the EPL has ever seen, comparing him with the likes of Alex Ferguson. But at the start, because of the results, they said he's going to fail. He's going to be a failure in the Premier League. So these pundits are not doing well. And over the years, it's getting worse because hot takes are the new way to live. So if you appreciate deeper, evidence-based commentary, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification button. Let's build a smarter football community together and raise the standards of thinking around football conversations. And remember, I said you should watch people who discuss systems in full and look at the upsides of the downside and downsides of the system. Every system has upsides and downsides, but also the upsides and downsides of a system is so much complicated. Not just the system on paper. It's based on the personnel you're executing with. It's based on the opponent and their system, and it's based on the personnel the opponent is using to execute their system. So sometimes even the efficiency of your system is not down to you yourself. There's so many things. It's true that managers have to take all of these into account, but pundits should not act as if it's putting one extra midfielder or it's the results that determines whether or not a manager is doing well. Football pundits have one job. Their job is to keep you watching. That's why the pendulum swings so fast. One week tactic is genius, the next week it's naive. For the same tactic for one club is genius, for the other club is naive. Right? One week a striker is clinical for shooting quickly, the next week he's harsh. If a striker shoots without first being balanced and he strikes it very quickly low and hard and he scores, they would say that's genius. He was self-aware to smash it in before the defender could set themselves. But that's only if the striker scored. If the striker missed, they would say he's not calm. That has been his problem. He takes shots too quickly just because he missed. Right? And I think that's the problem with football punditry. The truth is messier than people like to admit. Systems aren't inherently good or bad. They succeed or fail depending on execution, balance, personnel, opponents, and all these factors also applying to the opponents. Outcome bias punditry, tribal narrative punditry, and media incentives flatten the quality and complexity of discussions into a simple, harsh, hot headline that is going to be catchy. So don't let pundits tell you what to think. Watch the game for yourself closely. Find thoughtful analysts and find your own view. And to talk about analysts, I'm sure on this channel very soon, we'll start doing proper tactical analysis of teams and games and show you a tactics board where we move things around and exhaustively discuss how a tactic is meant to work, what the thinking of the manager is, and why they are struggling, and why those struggles might not be the thing that should be viewed as judging the manager based on that. I think people have to be very, very cautious of the way in which they view the discussions of pundits. So don't let pundits tell you what to think. Watch the game closely, find thoughtful analysts, and view it for yourself. If you enjoyed this rant, or this episode, or this discussion as to why pundits are ruining the discussions around football, rate and review the podcast. Leave a like, leave a comment, let us know what you think, and share it with a friend who argues about football based only on what Gary Neville or Jamie Carragher said last night. And remember, pundits are in the business of entertainment. You are in the business of enjoying football. Don't confuse the two, because usually their entertainment comes at the cost of ruining your football, because the harsh, negative, bad things go way more viral. This has been Andrews. Thanks for listening to The Shaft Sports.